Welcome to Coming to Know Yourself. Today, I want to have a conversation about the ego, the alter ego, the true self, and the human self identity, and how they all kind of relate to each other. Uh, Generally, the ego is considered a bad thing, but the ego is actually what it means in the original language is the I in I am, or the one, the single, solitary. And so when we're thinking of the negative aspects of ego, we're more relating to the alter ego. The original ego, or the oneness, the I and I am, that ego stands for eternal goodness and oneness, EGO. And so originally, when we were first born and came into being, not when the body was first born, but when our soul, our spirit, our consciousness, awareness came into being, we were living through that ego, the oneness, the I and I am, the original self. And so we were living through the eternal, the knowledge of the eternal, eternity, the divine, and it was a life lived in nothing but goodness and oneness. Then, when we come here for this spiritual human experience, we fall from that high level of consciousness, from that grace, of that high oneness of knowledge of goodness and the knowledge of eternal divine knowledge. And then we sacrifice that self-identity, that self-image. And that self-image that is sacrificed, that ego, is what's called in Genesis the image that God made us in, his likeness. And man means the spiritual being, just first man, the I and I, the I am. Doesn't mean like human being, male man. It means just the being, the man. And so that original image that God made us in was all the things of eternal knowledge of goodness and oneness, which are the knowledge of love and truth. The knowledge of love incorporates what is all that is our purity of heart. It is what keeps the wholeness inside, the joy, the happiness. It is the doorway or gateway to heaven. It is the connection, direct connection to the divine, to God that we have. And that self-image allows us, when God made us in his image, the reason why he made us in his likeness is because that image is not like a body or something that you can see. It's an image that's placed inside of our minds, which fills our souls with the ability to see through the lens, see life through the lens of God, to experience how God sees life, his eternal wisdom, his eternal oneness, his purity of love, and the truth, the light of truth, which is the truth of our being, our spiritual being, the true self, that oneness in the self, that high state of awareness, that high state of consciousness. And that is the original ego. That is the divine self-image that God made us in. Then we come here and we have the alter ego. Alter meaning the sacrificial ego. And the altar that we sacrifice our original ego on is our hearts. It is the altar to which all things pass through, and things that we seek for and things that we sacrifice for is based on our hearts, our desires, our wants. And so when we come into this human life, we sacrifice our original self-image that God made us in, and we create our own human identity. And just to preface that the original ego of eternal goodness and oneness is all that is positive. It's the polarity of all positivity. It is the light. Then when we sacrifice that on the altar of our hearts and create an alternative ego, the alter ego, then we create a new identity, a new self-image, an image made in man's likeness, the human likeness. And that alter ego stands for emotionally generated outlook. So we're no longer looking through the lens of eternal goodness and oneness, of the light of love and truth in the divine. We are now looking through an emotionally generated lens of all that is pleasure, that we find pleasurable, all that we find fearful, all that we find suffering in. That alter ego or human self-identity is actually the negative polarity of our being. It is the darkness of our soul. So we then now see life filling our soul with the darkness. And there's a scripture where Jesus or Yehoshua says, if thine eye be single, then thy whole body be full of light. But if thine eye be filled with darkness, the whole body is filled with darkness. And so perception, when it's in that singularity, in that single perception, then we are filled with the light of that original divine self, that original ego, the eternal goodness and oneness. And when you have an alternate ego, an alter ego, then your mind and your heart are divided into two states of being, two identities, and you're not sure which one you really are. And so it makes for the lack of understanding of the meaning of life. It makes you feel lost, makes you feel you don't understand what is going on and where you're going, and you're trying to seek a way out of your suffering and your darkness. And so when you have darkness, when you're in that negative polarity of the alter ego, then your eye is not single. It's not in the original self-image. It's not filled with nothing but the positive polarity of light, of truth and love. You're now divided, and in that division you have a broken heart, and the darkness can come through. And that negative polarity of the human self-image, that is our alter ego, now is the one that is ruling our lives, because now we're seeing through a lens of darkness. And that's why it is the emotionally generated outlook. We spend most of our lives jumping from one feeling to the next, emotionally being affected, seeking pleasure while avoiding pain, and always seeing through a low level of consciousness and awareness, where we are constantly trying to get out of that emotional strife, that anxiety. And so being in that alter ego is not the true self, because the true self is that original oneness, that eternal goodness at the high state of awareness. And when you're living life through that emotionally generated outlook, you're actually in a state of emotional and spiritual unwellness, a lack of well-being. You don't have inner peace. When you don't have inner peace, then you lack emotional clarity. When you lack emotional clarity, then your abilities, your spiritual abilities of reasoning, of logic, of understanding are at a low level. They're compromised. And that's why you have that darkness in you, that lack of understanding. And so the only recourse is to constantly jump from one feeling to the other. Oh, this feels good. Oh, this doesn't feel good. And so the mind is constantly being populated with what we're seeking to feel good and avoiding what not to feel good, because we're sitting or resting our state of mind in that negative polarity, that human identity, that alter ego. And that's the one that generally society talks about, is that alter ego, because an emotionally generated outlook is a delusional outlook. It's a illusion of what life really is. You're not seeing clearly. Everything is cloudy. Your mind is just full of constant emotion and thoughts and feelings. You're just not still and at rest and in that clarity. And so the idea is to come back to yourself, to come to know that oneness again, to find that eternal side of yourself, that goodness, seeking the self-love, filling yourself with the self-love, and letting go of the negative polarity of the alter ego, the human identity, and letting go of all negativity, all negative polarity, accepting yourself as you are, letting go of all your mistakes, discarding your traumas, stop seeking a medicinal medicating of your emotional being with pleasure, escapism, drugs, alcohol, anything that just sedates you emotionally with emotional stimulation, to ignore the inside while focusing on the outside. Now it's time to flip it around. Your original ego, the original self-image, is here vague in the background of your mind and your heart, and right in the forefront is that human self-identity, that alter ego, that suffering, that negative polarity. The entire human identity, from the very moment your physical body is born, is the negative polarity. Once you forget who you are and you create this self-identity, you're in the negative polarity. Anytime you feel joy, happiness, peace, love, you're momentarily flipping to the original ego, the original image that God made us in, and feeling that oneness, that goodness, the eternal experience of life. But then immediately you go right back to experiencing that human identity. And that human identity is just like a vessel, a container to store knowledge and experience, to gather wisdom, to learn what you are not and what you do not want to experience, which is the negative polarity, for contrast, so that you can experience and stay in your original self-image, the one that God made us in, his likeness. And so that is the true self, the original self-image that God made us in. It is the awareness. Our spirit is that awareness, the self. And when you come back to that original ego, the eternal goodness and oneness, then you're in that constant state of high self-awareness. And you're in that state of oneness. And you're feeling and experiencing your original state of being, which is inner peace. And you're primarily experiencing your presence, your existence, your being. And the way that happens is you're feeling only one feeling primarily, which is your original state of being. Instead of the human identity where you're constantly jumping from one feeling to the next, from opinions to judgments to fears to prejudices to pursuits of pleasure to anxieties to sorrow to guilt, whatever it is, shame, jumping from all those feelings, or feelings about the body and how it looks and how we want to change it, or whatever feelings we're having, instead of jumping to all those feelings constantly, which drains your emotional well-being, you come back to resting in one single feeling, just the feeling of your original being, which is inner peace. And when you don't know that feeling of your true self, it becomes this vague feeling back here. And the original ego, the eternal goodness and oneness, the original divine self-image, all of that is floating back here in your mind and in your heart. Very vague experience. And so the only way to recognize it when you don't remember it is to see the one feeling that has never changed since you were born physically. That is the original ego, the original eternal goodness and oneness, the original divine self-image that God made us in, the original self, the true self, the one that to come to know thyself. It is the awareness, it is your true presence, it is how you know you exist, it is what Jesus says, the life. And so that feeling, when you don't know it, is casually recognized, and it's never changed, it's always been with us, as the feeling of being alone. But that word alone is only that feeling because we're not centered in being that feeling. Spinoza says, I feel, therefore I am. So when you're in your alter ego and you're constantly jumping from one feeling to the next, every feeling is an I am. I am suffering. I am tired. I am bored. I am looking for pleasure. I am this. I am that. But the one I am, when you bring it back and center yourself and come to know that feeling, that alone feeling is no longer an alone feeling. It merges to who you really are. And it becomes the all one feeling. Alone, all one. Kind of the same word, only different when you're not centered in who you are. When you're not centered in who you are, you feel alone. Alone is a feeling of being lost and out of center, not knowing where you're going. And so when you center in that all one feeling and you come to know that alone feeling as who you truly are and say, this feeling is me, by saying, I feel alone, therefore I am this alone feeling. Because what I am feeling is what I am being, and what I am being is who and what I am. So many feelings come and go, and they're all temporary. The human body changes, the feeling of the human body changes constantly. It's growing, it's changing, it's getting sick, it's getting old, it's getting damaged, whatever. Every feeling, it changes constantly. The feelings about our lives, our opinions, our judgments, our prejudices, every experience we have changes. All those feelings constantly change. They are not the truth. They are temporary. What is temporary is not the eternal truth. It is a falseness, an illusion. But that alone feeling has never changed. It's always been with us. It never rises or falls. It's this constant sameness. Because it is the inner peace. When you let go of the human self-identity, your mind comes to rest. All those feelings, all that constant compulsive thinking, all those things are populated in the human identity, the negative polarity. All that stuff goes away, and you come to rest in yourself. And then that feeling of alone is a feeling of all one. Because now you're in a state of feeling self-aware. Because you can say, I feel alone or all one, therefore I feel myself. And so now I am aware of myself, because that alone feeling is the self. So now you're being self-aware. And so now that alone feeling, it can be recognized as feeling your presence, your vibration. And when your mind is at rest and your heart is healing and it's in that state of oneness, then your emotional being, your spiritual being is healing, and you feel the fullness of that alone, all one feeling, and it feels like inner peace. It's calmness. And everything outside of you no longer affects you, because now you're centered in knowing that that feeling of aloneness, all oneness, is who you are, and you don't have to go out there jumping around looking for other feelings to jump around. You're not affected or dependent upon your environment. And so the idea is to come to know that feeling more than any feeling you ever had. And it requires your complete focus and attention to bring your attention to that alone feeling and bring it to the forefront. And your human identity, let it go. Let it kind of fade in the background. Stop thinking about your body and how it looks. Get rid of all your opinions, all your judgments. Let go of all your trauma. It doesn't matter. It was just an experience. Your human identity is not who you are. It does not make who you are. It's just experiences together with wisdom. So you can say, I know what I know now, and I wish I knew what I know now then, so I could live my life differently. It's just, it's just hindsight. That's all it is. The human identity is just hindsight. It will not be who you are. You're an eternal being. You are a being of energy and light. Energy cannot be destroyed, and your form is the highest state of energy. Consciousness and awareness is the highest state of energy. You cannot be destroyed. You are indestructible. The body will disappear. Your life will change around you, but you will always be that eternal self, the goodness, the oneness, the truth, the light of truth, which is the high state of consciousness, and the love, which is the high state of awareness, which is empathy. And so it takes time out from all of the distractions to come back to that original ego, the alone self, to feel that alone feeling and merge with it. Right now, the feeling of your body and your human identity are merged with that alone feeling and your awareness of self. And it feels like they're all in the same place and all in the same space, and they're all a part of the same part of your life, your being, but they're not. You need to separate the two and get to know. You already know the feeling of a body and your life and your human identity and all your opinions and past and trauma. But the feeling of the aloneness, the oneness, that is very vague. So now focus on getting to know that. Get to know the two differences, the contrast between the two, just as much as you know the difference between being happy and sad. The happiness is the emotional wellness, the contentment, the inner peace of the true self. The sadness is the human experience, the negative polarity, the alter ego versus the original oneness of the original ego, the God's image that he made us in. So get to know them and see the contrast and separate them. So then your original ego, your original self-image, the aloneness, the all-oneness, will become right in the forefront, and it'll become who you are. It'll be that true eye of perception, of consciousness, and your human identity will then be pushed in the background. It'll be less experienced, the negative polarity will fade away. Pretty soon your human identity will be like a distant memory. You won't even feel like that is who you are. If you let go of that human identity, it'll be like someone else. It'll be like some old photograph in an old photo album. You're like, wow, I remember that guy. I'm not that person. I know about that girl. Man, she went through hard times. That's not who I am, though. And you'll become an entirely different person. I gave up my entire life to become the truth, become my true self, to ascend out of that alter ego and into my true oneness of the original divine self and become enlightened to my spiritual being. And I have never looked back. All my suffering was worth it to come to this place of being. And so this video is about ego versus alter ego. Ego being the oneness, the eternal goodness and oneness. Alter ego being when we sacrificed our true self for the human identity, the alternative self that we sacrificed on the altar, which is our hearts, and the true self, which is that alone feeling, that all oneness, that awareness, that presence of being that we feel every day when we're all by ourselves, and we can say, I'm all by myself. I know it because I feel alone. I feel, therefore I am. And when I feel alone, I know, therefore, that this is my I am. It is who I am being, and it is who and what I am. So come back to yourself, get to know that feeling, take time out from the world, find a place to be alone, the woods, a place of sanctuary where there's not a lot of distractions. Let go of distracting yourself with things, your phone. Let go of everything in your mind and just meditate on that aloneness and get to know that feeling. Make everything around you just ambiance. No specific feeling about anything around you, so you can detach from the human life. Make everything you see just seeing. No detail, no creating ideas or opinions about what you see. Look through things. Make your consciousness a state of oneness. And bring all your feelings and everything that you're experiencing just to that single point of aloneness. And get to notice who you are. And lock yourself there. That is your center of being. And life seen through that lens, through the image that God made us in, so much more lighter. It's like you see everything from a high state of being, from a tall mountain. Your awareness is so expanded, you can see life so clearly, you can live your life so easily. And then fill yourself with self-love. Learn to love yourself, accept yourself at all times. When life is trying to affect your feelings and move you out of that center of that all oneness, accept yourself, total self-acceptance. Stay in that peace. Learn the ways of love, the way of to stay in that truth of that eternal life is self-love. And when you love yourself and you're in that truth of the original self-image of our divine self, of that eternal goodness and oneness, then you're in that eternal life and you stay there. And the way is love. All the attributes of love are to keep you in that center. You know, patience, forgiveness, understanding, unconditional, compassion, kindness, gentleness, consistency, reliability, balance, harmony. All the attributes of relation versus the attributes of division. Division is negativity, the human identity. Unity, relationships. That is the oneness. That is love. Focus on that. Fill your heart with your natural way of being, which is love. That love is relation, and relation is the awareness. Awareness, relation, love, they are all the I am. They are the self. So put your faith totally in love. Come to know that truth of your eternal oneness, of that aloneness of your being, and lock yourself there and make that how you see through reality, through total self-awareness. Until our next video, we'll expand more on those concepts, but that is just a basic concept of those parts of our being. Until then, I send you my peace and my love, and I'm always thinking about you, and I'm always hoping that your suffering is very minimal and that you're coming back to yourself. Until then, take care.